Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Small Field Drafts. MP here, loaded up in another $3 three-team best ball draft on Underdog. I'm sitting here in the 101 spot. And one thing I just want to make sure that we're all doing when we get in these three-person drafts, we're starring Mark Andrews in the queue. His ADP is artificially depressed. We want to make sure we don't forget about him when the time comes. So first thing, when you get in your lobby, make sure you're starring Mark Andrews' name. We just don't want to forget about him. We also don't want to forget about him and draft him at 101. At 101 here, I want to go Justin Jefferson. Now, I've talked a few times about how Christian McCaffrey is in contention to be my 101 in this format, but I have experienced him falling back to me at 203. It doesn't happen often, but it can happen sometimes, whereas Justin Jefferson is never going to fall back to you if you're here at the one spot. So McCaffrey went off the board and Kelsey. One of the other reasons why I like taking both of these wide receivers here at 1 and 2 instead of taking a guy like McCaffrey or Kelsey is that it forces the person in the 3 spot to make a bit of a tough decision. It's not so easy what you should do. A lot of people do go for this McCaffrey-Kelsey combo, but that does happen to leave you pretty thin at wide receiver when that time comes. Now, back at my turn here, we have a choice. What I do like to do is grab Cooper Kupp. I do think he's definitely fighting for a #1 overall wide receiver finish again this year. I think he has that in his bag. Austin Eckler is a player who has been rising significantly up the draft board. Earlier in the offseason, you could wait and get him in the 4th, 5th round sometimes if you were smart, but he's been steamed up ever since he signed his contract that you can't really afford to pass on him at the round 3 spot here. He's never going to make it back to me again in round 4. McCaffrey and Eckler are in a tier of their own, in my opinion. However, Bijan Robinson, if he continues to fall down the board, and if we do start to get some more value on him, say at picks 12 and 13, like we might be coming up on here, we might consider taking him more than we have previously because his ADP was higher. And I also wasn't so big on him because he doesn't profile as a guy who's going to catch a ton of passes. And that's the profile of the running back that we're looking for when we're hoping to score over 300 fantasy points in this half PPR format. Now, I'm interested in Bijan Robinson because, well, he could very well be the greatest running back in the NFL without having ever played a down, and we are going to draft him right here. But also, Atlanta has significantly one of the softest schedules this year. In fact, the entire NFC South has a very easy schedule because they have to play each other. And that's one thing I want to be thinking of while I'm making in these drafts this year is not just the players, but also their team situations. Now, Las Vegas, on the other side, happens to have one of the most difficult strengths of schedules, but Devontae Adams really is the only guy in Vegas, and we want to make sure that we are not getting left behind at wide receiver. We have an excellent wide receiver core and an excellent running back core. And I think we should still be able to get some of our favorite picks in the tier 1 of quarterbacks. I don't want any more than one of these guys, but we want to make sure we get at least one of them because we don't want to be falling behind at any position. This game of 3-team best ball is about positional allocation and draft capital. It's not so much about things like stacking. Now, roster construction is a big part of it. You want to make sure you're not too thin or too heavy, especially at the onesie positions like quarterback and tight end. But that especially goes for quarterback. I don't want to be drafting more than one of these first tier of quarterbacks. So let's keep an eye on what our opponents are doing right here. Dawsey here in the 2 spot has taken 6 consecutive wide receivers, whereas Garver here at the 3 hole has taken only 2 wide receivers and 3 running backs plus Travis Kelsey. Now right here, we have Garrett Wilson falling to us at this pick. And we also, because we have Mark Andrews starred, this is about the period in the draft where people start to recognize that they should probably take Mark Andrews because his name doesn't appear unless you scroll down a little bit on the player queue over on the left side here. But once you start to get to this point in the draft, people do start to scroll down and remember that the tight end button exists and that Mark Andrews is a cut above the rest of the tight ends behind him, and he provides much more of an advantage than probably these guys here at running back and wide receiver. Now, because Garrett Wilson is a top 10 wide receiver who has fallen down the board to us, we are definitely going to take him. I like that a lot because while Dawsey here took 6 wide receivers in a row, he, quote unquote, in my opinion, reached for Jalen Waddle and T. Higgins. You definitely didn't need to take those guys at picks 14 and 17, respectively, while Garrett Wilson was still on the board. So even though he spent his first 6 picks on wide receiver, I think all 3 or 4, of our wide receivers are competing with every one of his wide receivers. So I don't feel like we're falling behind, even though he spent a lot more draft capital on wide receiver. We're definitely crushing our buddy Garver here in the 3 spot at wide receiver, in my opinion. And while he does have Kelsey and McCaffrey and now Josh Allen, I think we can mitigate the advantage that he's getting from those players with a couple of strategies. Interestingly enough here, Dawsey in the 2 spot took TJ Hawkinson. Obviously, he was had his eyes on Mark Andrews, and we sniped him right out from under him. And he panicked, maybe, in my opinion, and took TJ Hawkinson. Definitely not where he usually goes there. Okay, now we have Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes on the board. We're also getting some significant value on Jonathan Taylor. Perhaps we should go and draft a 3rd running back because they are important. They are going to be hitting our roster lineup quite a lot, and Jonathan Taylor is a great running back. Now, I was curious about taking Devontae Smith and stacking him with Jalen Hurts there, but since we do have a very strong wide receiver core, we already have 4 top 10 wide receivers. I don't think we need to push getting Devontae Smith, even though I do think he is the last wide receiver of his tier sitting here. It is going to be very important for us that we get one of these first tier of quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts was number 1 in points per game last year until he got injured. Patrick Mahomes was the number 1 overall. So I do like the idea of taking Jalen Hurts over Patrick Mahomes, but it's pretty much a toss-up in my opinion there. We don't have too much in terms of stacking. We don't have anybody on Kansas City or Philadelphia at the moment. Now, again, midway through the draft here in round 10, I want to go back to tight end and start starring more of these guys, specifically Dallas Goedert as well, but also Kyle Pitts and George Kittle. After Dallas Goedert, in my opinion, is a tier break, and I don't want to be drafting any of these other tight ends because I've already got Mark Andrews. Now, I will draft all 3 of these tight ends that are left on the board, even though I already have Mark Andrews. And that's my theory of what I'm calling the tight end rug. I want to not draft Travis Kelce. I don't want to spend a top 4, top 5 pick on Travis Kelce. Instead, what I want to do is take advantage of the fact that Mark Andrews' ADP and the rest of the tight ends' ADPs are being depressed because the ADP here is based off of the 12-team drafts, not the 3-team drafts. And I want to get as many of these middle tight ends as possible to mitigate the advantage that Travis Kelce is giving the other owner. Okay, let's see what we're doing here. Devontae Smith falls to us again. What happened? Dawsey took Joe Burrow. Okay, so this guy, Dawsey, at the 2 spot, I think he's not drafting very well. He's pretty much taking himself out of this draft, in my opinion, by leaving us the value of Devontae Smith there and him drafting Joe Burrow before Patrick Mahomes even. I'm considering taking Patrick Mahomes just because, again, I don't love the idea of drafting 2 of the first 3 quarterbacks, but he usually does not fall to pick 31. And I don't want the other guys to get the value on him. And I don't think there's any huge need that we're seeing at wide receiver and running back. I do want to get these 3 tight ends. I don't want to have to concede this tight end value to the other 2 players. But Patrick Mahomes, that is a value we cannot pass up on at pick 31. Sometimes he goes at pick like 15 or 16. That is crazy value that we're getting. Let's take a look at the big board and just see what's happening. After round 6 in this draft, things have been going a bit wild. A lot of running backs being taken in this kind of round 8, 9, 10 range. That's what you usually see happen. In the first 5 or 6 rounds, you get most of the top 10, 11 receivers going off the board, including the top 3 running backs and Travis Kelce. Then after that, right, you can see the different tiers of running back. Nick Chubb and Saquon Barkley kind of in their own. Jonathan Taylor, I think, usually does fit in with them, and we got a little value on him falling down to us. Wow. Dawsey taking Tua. Okay, we can pretty much guarantee that this is a 50-50 battle between ourselves and Garver over here. This guy Dawsey at the 2 spot, he's paying our rake. So this is pretty much a free roll for us. We got exactly what we wanted to happen. We got these tight ends to fall back to us. What do I want to do? Do I want to draft Breece Hall? Breece Hall is a guy in this format that is interesting because of the fact he has an ACL tear and there's no playoffs. You know, the back half of the year isn't counting so much like it is in Best Ball Mania, where in week 16, 17, you really need your players to show up. That's why Breece Hall, I think, has such a high ADP. Whereas in this format, this sit and go, it's more of a cumulative scoring format. Okay, let's make our decision here. We want Dallas Goedert because he pairs up with our Jalen Hurts stack at tight end. I'm taking 2 tight ends in a row because I want to play bully ball. I want to prevent our opponent, specifically Mr. Garver over here, who has Travis Kelce and who probably feels like he can push tight end and just draft another guy like David Njoku or Pat Freiermuth or Evan Ingram, and it's not going to matter because he's got Kelce, right? Meanwhile, we are taking the value that we're getting on these depressed ADPs at tight end. We're taking Mark Andrews, we're taking Kyle Pitts, we're taking Dallas Goedert, Dawsey, Irv Smith. I mean, I don't even know how you come up with finding Irv Smith. He's like tight end 30 or something in this ranks. Here's another hot tip for any of you 3-person best ball players out there. Do not scroll down the queue, okay? You're only drafting the top 54, 55 players or so. There is no reason to scroll down the queue. There's definitely no reason to scroll down the queue to like the tight end 30 range. So unfortunately, if we could have gotten Dawsey to take George Kittle instead of Irv Smith, that would have been really good for us. Unfortunately, Garver, he gets the value on George Kittle at pick 40 to pair with his Travis Kelce. So we might have scared Garver into taking George Kittle by taking Kyle Pitts and Dallas Goedert back to back. But it was kind of a toss-up on what was going to happen there. And we get really good value, in fact, incredible value on Breece Hall. This draft is not like most of the drafts you'll see because one of the players is basically taking himself out of it. Breece Hall usually never lasts until pick 42. I will take him even though there's questions about his health and his availability. As our running back 4, I think that is excellent. If he can turn it up in the second half of the year and start making our lineup then, we're going to be coming away really clean. We're also getting excellent value on Deebo Samuel here as our wide receiver 6. He's a guy who I really like because we all know he can blow up on any given week, break off huge yak touchdowns. San Francisco is a dominant team, and also they have a very easy schedule because they play in the NFC, but also the NFC West specifically, playing each of those other teams twice per year, and most of those teams are not very good in the case of the Rams and the Cardinals. And in the case of the Seahawks, they are good. Their offense is good, but their defense isn't anything that we're going to consider to be stifling to the Rams, or excuse me, to the 49ers, even though sometimes these divisional games can be a bit of a slogfest, be a bit of a defensive battle. All right, we want to put a couple guys in the queue here. Wow, Keenan Allen has been shooting up the board. He was usually down here around ADP 40 some or so. I do think he probably deserves it, although I don't know of any news specifically that was bringing his ADP up. Probably just something that people in the industry are just starting to notice. That's very interesting. He is a guy that I like a lot this year, betting on the Chargers. Okay, Garver went with the Herbert Allen stack. So let's see who he's got. Our real competition is Garver here, sitting at the 3 hole. He's drafted, let's look at his team from here. He's got Josh Allen and Justin Herbert, McCaffrey, Chubb, Barkley, Pollard, and Jacobs. So he's probably not drafting too many more running backs. He's already, okay, I mean, he can really do anything with his last 2 picks. And what are we going to do? We only have 4 running backs. We definitely need another quarterback because Hurts and Mahomes are on bye. I'll take another running back in Najee Harris, a guy who we know is secure in the quote-unquote workhorse role on his team. There is Jalen Warren there who could poach some third down work, perhaps steal some more work as the season goes on, but I am projecting Najee Harris to have a lot of work this year. And because of the fact that Dawsey is sitting here making all kinds of crazy picks, launching his team into the sun, we're getting excellent value on Justin Fields to cover not just our bye week, but because of the fact that he can break off these massive rushing touchdowns of 50, 60, 70 yards. He had the most rushing yards on runs over 20 yards last year. I mean, it was crazy. If you watch the Chicago Bears last year, I mean, sorry to you, but the runs that Justin Fields was ripping off was like nothing I'd ever seen, probably since Michael Vick was in the league. Now, he had so many rushing yards, probably would have broken Lamar's rushing record if he had played that last week of the year. But he took like 91 sacks, I believe. And if you calculate all the yards he lost and subtract that to the yards he gained rushing the ball, I mean, it really wasn't much. And clearly that played out as they got the #1 overall pick in the draft for this year. So let's finish up. We have one more pick. We're good on quarterback. I mean, this quarterback room is something I never get, never ever. But because of the fact, right, we're not just playing ourselves. We want to make sure we keep an eye on what the rest of the room is doing. And one guy is picking blind and scrolling the wheel. We have 5 running backs. We don't have too much bye week trouble. There's just 2 guys on week 11. That's probably fine. If we have an injury and Breece Hall is injured, we might be a little thin. We have 6 wide receivers, 13, 10, 10. Nothing terrible in terms of bye weeks. And because our top 4 wide receivers are so strong, I don't think we need to grab another wide receiver. None of these guys that are left on the board here, I think, are going to be hitting our lineup all that often, especially over these guys here. Tight end, we're good. We don't have any trouble there. I don't feel like any of the tight ends left. Nope, none of those guys I want to draft. So I'm just going to take Aaron Jones, the guy who's #1 running back on his team, could be better than people are expecting. And running back is the position that has the highest opportunity to increase in ADP value throughout the season because of the fact that it's not based as much on skill and talent as it is on opportunity, which can change throughout the year much more dramatically than the rest of the positions. So I really like our team. I think obviously we have an excellent shot. We're 50-50 with Garver, and let's see how we compare to him heads up. We can totally forget Dawsey here, unless we want to look at his team just to laugh at him. That might be interesting. Let's go over our team once more. Quarterback, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Fields. Probably the greatest quarterback room I've ever seen. Running back, Austin Eckler, Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall, Najee Harris, Aaron Jones. 2 guys who have extreme top-tier talent that we spent some pretty high capital on. Jonathan Taylor, who we know might be able to return to form and have a top 3 running back season, even though Indianapolis is going to have a tough time with a rookie running quarterback. But we got good value on him at pick 24. Breece Hall, one of the best running backs last year, though he did tear his ACL. He'll be coming back probably pretty slow, but we got good value on him at pick 42. Najee Harris, Aaron Jones, just 2 guys to throw on the end of your bench and see what happens. Wide receiver, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, Devonta Smith, Deebo Samuel. An excellent wide receiver room. The only thing you might be able to say is 6 wide receivers might not be enough, especially if you have a couple of overlapping bye weeks. If you have an injury, we might have some trouble, but I don't think so. I think we have so many really strong guys that even if we lose 1 or 2 of these guys to injury, we should still be able to compete. And then tight end, a very strong room with Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts, and Dallas Goedert, 3 of the top 6 tight ends. And we are going to be hopefully making up some points on the Kelsey drafter. Now, he did get, who was that? Blanking on the San Francisco tight end's name. He did get George Kittle, and he drafted a 3rd tight end. Tight end is positioned much more so than quarterback. Even though it's a onesie position, a tight end can appear in your flex. And because tight end is so much more volatile, especially compared to quarterback, which is much more predictable, having more tight ends on your roster is going to help than having more quarterbacks. Now, because of the fact we made sure to prioritize the tier 2 and 3 tight ends, it forced him to get Darren Waller in the last round, as opposed to leaving him the value on Dallas Goedert. We want to make sure we're taking that value. If there's one thing I could have done to make my team just a little bit better, I would have wanted to take George Kittle and prevent him from taking that. But instead, we were getting this insane value at quarterback and other places on the board. We just had to take it. So let's compare us to Garver here. He's got Josh Allen and Justin Herbert. Clearly, I think our quarterback room not only is better because we have 2 tier 1 quarterbacks as opposed to him only having 1. I don't think that gives you too much of an advantage. But here, We're also getting Justin Fields, who can break off those huge rushing touchdowns that I don't think either of these guys can do. Obviously, Allen's a threat to run the ball, but he doesn't have the crazy speed and agility to make it 70 yards down the field like Justin Fields does. So I think we have an advantage at quarterback. Running back, he's got McCaffrey, Chubb, Barkley, Pollard, Jacobson, Gibbs. His top tier talent is obviously much higher than ours, but Austin Eckler was the overall RB1 last year, so we can't say that McCaffrey is guaranteed to finish better than Eckler. But I do like our chances. I'll give him a little bit of an advantage at running back against us, but I think we have enough top tier talent that we can compete with all of these guys here. And if a couple things break our way, we got some good value. I'm not all that worried. Ooh, and I'm seeing where we made up that value on him at wide receiver. His number 1 wide receiver is A.J. Brown. He's got CeeDee Lamb, Chris Olave, DK Metcalf, Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley, and Keenan Allen. I think not only do we have an advantage on him at wide receiver, we are absolutely crushing him, and in fact, might be lapping him in terms of points scored at this wide receiver position, which is very important because on a weekly basis, minimum, you are starting 3 wide receivers. You have to start 3 wide receivers every single week of the year with a chance to start a 4th in your flex. I like our odds of crushing him at every single wide receiver spot every week of the year. So I'm going to give us a major advantage at wide receiver. And then tight end, he has Travis Kelce and George Kittle, whereas we have Mark Andrews, who obviously he's not equal to Travis Kelce. Mark Andrews is falling behind, but he does have a chance, I think, of finishing as the tight end 1. And I think he's much better than George Kittle, Kyle Pitts, that next tier. So Kelce is better than Andrews. But if you say Andrews plus Goddard equals Kelce, and then you say Kyle Pitts equals George Kittle, okay, and he's got Waller on us. I'll give him a little bit of an advantage at tight end just because he's got the top end talent, he's got good depth to fill in, and he's got even some mid-tier talent, a guy that can blow up and have some spike weeks, score a pair of touchdowns here and there throughout the year. So I'm going to say he's got an advantage at tight end, although I think we mitigated some of the advantage that he would have had we not drafted 3 of those top 6 tight ends. We're crushing him at wide receiver. He's got a bit of an advantage at us at running back, and I think we have a big advantage at quarterback. Even if Josh Allen finishes as the overall QB1, I think between Mahomes, Hurts, and Justin Fields, we're going to be able to rack up more total QB points in our roster than him. So let's just take a peek at Dawsey's team here and have a good laugh. Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and Tua. Again, it's not like a room you're saying I hate it, but just the way that he took him, the order that he took him, the picks in, it just didn't make any sense. Taking Joe Burrow before Lamar Jackson, drafting Tua at pick 35, a guy who you could take at pick 50 if you wanted to draft him. Nobody's clamoring for Tua in this format. His top running back is Derrick Henry. He's only got 5. He's definitely not competing with us. He's not competing with us at quarterback. He's not even close to competing with us at running back. Wide receiver, this is the only place I'll give it to him. He's got a chance to keep up with us. He's got Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, Jameson Williams, and Marquise Brown. So I can see why people who are into best ball sometimes don't know how to change mindsets between the different types of drafts they're doing. I think he felt because he had Jamar Chase that he had to reach for T. Higgins at pick 17. Remember, he left us Garrett Wilson on the board. That was very interesting. He felt like because he had those 2 guys, he had to draft Joe Burrow at pick 26. You don't need to do that. Even if you don't get the chance to draft Joe Burrow, you're going to be okay. You're going to be cashing in on Cincinnati's points being a high-powered offense through Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I do like the idea if you're going to draft Jamar Chase and then you end up getting Higgins. Okay, let's take Joe Mixon in some of the later rounds. Let's get Joe Burrow. Let's go all in on Cincinnati. If we're right on Cincinnati, we want to be right in a big way. We know they're going to be a high-powered offense. I don't hate that. I think that's pretty good. I think that's pretty sharp in these formats. But be smart about where you're taking them. Use ADP in a smart way, right? We know that tight end is being artificially depressed because these ADPs aren't based on 3 teams, they're based on 12 teams. So we're making sure that we're reaching early on tight end. Quarterback, we don't need to do that. We don't need to draft Joe Burrow. Running back, he's nowhere close to us. Wide receiver, okay, sure. He's got 4 guys in the top 10 as well, so he can compete with us any week of the year, and there's no doubt about that. And he's got some really strong guys in Jalen Waddle and T. Higgins as well. But Jameson Williams, I mean, even if you think he's a great talent, you saw a couple of long bomb touchdowns last year, even though he only had 1 reception officially on the books. He's guaranteed suspended 6 games, so he's not hitting your roster at all for a third of the year. That's a huge detriment in this format where every week counts for equally the same amount. And Marquise Brown, I mean, I like him, but Arizona is just going to be a dumpster fire this year. I don't mind him as your last pick, but with just the rest of the rest of the way this draft went, it's a total dumpster fire. And then TJ Hawkinson and Irv Smith. Irv Smith at pick 38. I've never seen a more egregious pick in this 3-team best ball format. So we can all have a good laugh. Glad we got it on stream. That's just why we should play these 3-person drafts. You never know what kind of what strategy these people are following, what thoughts are going through their head. There's no justification for practically anything on this guy's team. And that's good for us. He's paying our rake. We're basically got a free roll. We're going heads up against our buddy here, D Garver 21. And I like our odds of beating him and taking home the $8 prize. So thanks for joining me today. That's MP from Small Field Drafts. Join me again next time. We'll be doing some 4-team, 6-team drafts if we can get those lobbies to fill. Come on, guys. Let me see you in there. And maybe some higher stakes stuff we can get off of the $3, and we can maybe get some big money in there, some $10, $15, $100 drafts, $500 drafts maybe. Let me know what you all want to see. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the